Rama, as our kids say.
Bad out here.
And 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 then my father, who came up with my absolute favorite name. Every time somebody sees us at his job, he yells "Coco!" Like my daddy has issues. So anyway, so of course, as always, we want to hear from you this morning. We are taking your prayer requests, your praise reports, as well as we just want to hear about what your weekend was like besides being cold. You can call us at 414-578-1560. I will say that the Packers did not win yesterday against Detroit. However, they are still headed to the NFC division game, so they still have the best record um, in the NFC. So kudos to all y'all Packer fans out there, even though that they lost yesterday 30-37. I'm just saying.
I know that took a lot for you to say.
What? The congratulations part?
Yeah, I did.
I mean, it is what it is. You know, I'm not a hater. There's not a hater bone in my body. I love a winner. I love a champion. Um, I just don't love the Packers. So, and but here's the thing. So here's the thing about when you're from Chicago, but you live in Milwaukee for so many years. Unless the Packers are playing Chicago or the Bucks are playing the Bulls or some other Milwaukee, Wisconsin team is playing some Chicago, Illinois team, you really don't care. And you kind of go down to your contingency, which is you're going to cheer for your home team as far as the home in which you reside in at that time. So, I mean, no different than last year with the Bucks. I mean, by the end, I wanted to see the Bucks win for the city of Milwaukee.
So you're a fair weather fan, that's what you're saying.
No, it's not. It's not. It's not fair weather fan. It's. I mean, I do live here,
You root for
Milwaukee.
the home team. We appreciate it. We appreciate
I rooting is a strong word. I mean, I wouldn't say rooting. However, I'm just saying if my team's not in it. Now, here's the caveat. I am a huge Tom Brady fan and I'm a huge Russell Wilson fan. If it came down to it, well, we know that the Seahawks are not going to make it to the Super Bowl. However, if it comes down to it that the Chiefs make it, then the Packers can kick rocks as far as I'm concerned because I'm Tom Brady all day.
it. Jesus forgive her. She knows not what she does.
Oh,
It's
I know.
okay.
I know.
It's okay.
I know that Jesus anointed the hands. Um, just a second. We just got a text. Um, okay. Oh, okay. So anyway, what else is going on? Last week, the final verdict was issued. Well, first of all, before we get into this conversation, let me just say this. The views and points that we are about to share are not the views and points of WGLB radio. They are the views and points of Chantel McKenzie and Minister Fresh West. This is a bipartisan radio station, which means we don't cheer for or against any candidates or take any political affiliation whatsoever. Anything that would compromise any 501c3 or anything like that. I think I said all the legalities that I need to say. All right. So,
Let's pray first.
okay. Oh, yes, please.
Father, we thank you for the blood of Jesus. We thank you we have the blood bought right to get answers to all of our prayers. We thank you for waking us up this morning, this Monday morning. We thank you that everyone listening will be touched and impacted by something said or done on the show. We thank you that people will take your glory throughout the day and show your love, and everything that they do will be an example of your love. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. We have a caller? All right. Caller, you are live. Who do we have?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Amen.
Thank God. So thankful for all He's doing and what He's going to do. And
Amen.
He's still alive. And He lives in spite of all that's going on. He still lives.
Yes, he does.
And yes, I just want to say yes. Yes, I am a Packer fan. You know, I always comment on the Packers. One, but they lost, but they see it feels like they won because they played a phenomenal game yesterday. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I could see the rivalry in that. And hey, it was a good game. And I always love the Packers. Like I always have said, despite win or lose. But I have to say this, Sister McKenzie, when the Packers lose, you never say any. Win, you never say anything. The last thing you talk about, you won't even bring it up.
All right.
Or even prayer was the Packers law.
You're right. I couldn't wait to say it. You're right.
I know you would not talk about the Packers.
You're right. Hey, you know what? No. When the Packers beat the Bears, I said it right away.
I said, we got this, and it ain't over. We still going to the Super Bowl, and we got.
And I said that, and you know what, Sister Renee, when the Packers beat the Bears, it's the first thing I said as well. I did bring that up right away.
Today too, so.
Yep. It's kind of been a resounding thing for us this season.
Packers, I love the Packers, and yeah, that's all right. They lost, but they're still winners.
Yeah, you're still in a very good position.
We got scarred, but we still winning.
Yeah.
God bless you.
Y'all might go all the way.
Have a wonderful day.
Hey, you too. God bless you. Love Sister Renee. Love her love for her Packers. So I gave all the disclosures, and so first thing I want to talk about is the Ahmaud Arbery verdict came in last week. Guilty on all charges, sentenced to life in prison without parole.
It's a long time.
It is, and it's a powerful thing that that they were found guilty, and the charges that or the verdict that came down was the most was the heaviest verdict that could be brought upon them for what they had done. It won't bring him back for his family. I watched his father, his sister, and his mother make their statements to his killers in court, and it was very, very emotional and very moving, and there is nothing that can bring back his life, however, to see justice done in Georgia, in a small town in Georgia, where 3 white men hunted down a man for doing nothing but jogging while black, and to see them convicted is just it is very few and far between in this country.
And I think that's the most shocking part. Not shocking, but I think that's the most disappointing part, is that in America there was everybody was on pins and needles on what's the verdict going to be. Are they going to find him guilty? Is this going to be another? Is this going to be another case of a black person getting killed,
Breonna Taylor,
a white person,
right?
And nothing happening.
Right.
So I think that's what makes this such a landmark case, is that there was finally a rational verdict to where anyone that saw it was this man was jogging and people gunned him down.
Right.
So it didn't even have to be a race case. This was just an innocent person running and 3 people gunned him down. If that was anyone else, if that wasn't a black person, the verdict wouldn't have taken as long. And it would have just been like, oh my goodness, this innocent person was out running and 3 people ran him down. So it's sad that we have to celebrate when we get the justice and human rights that we deserve.
I think the most important thing is, I remember when this first happened, and I probably, because I'm a news junkie and I follow the Sean Kings of the world and the Lee Merritts and the Benjamin Crumps and a lot of the leading civil rights attorneys. And so they break this type of news first on Twitter and Instagram. And so I posted about this prior to the Associated Press picking it up. And very few people even paid attention to my post. I mean, they because at that point, the footage hadn't been released. But, I was reading this story, and I was moved enough and disturbed enough by the story that I thought it worth sharing on my social media channels. And so it was probably about a week later that the footage came out of what had actually occurred, at which case then um, it was a run for Ahmad. Hashtag started. You and our daughters took that run. Um, and people across the country took that run. And then the press picked it up and the footage was released. And I just want to say that killings like this aren't new. What's new are the cameras. And and the thing is that similar to what else happened last week was the Women of the Movement series that Jay-Z has produced, along with Will Smith, I believe, aired, which told the story of Mamie Till Mobley, which is Emmett Till's mother, which I read that book probably back in high school. And the most moving part, I mean, especially them being Chicagoans, me being from Chicago, me being driven past that house by my grandparents as a child, saying that was Emmett Till's house. It was very moving to me. And one of her most moving quotes to me was that she thought the problems of the South were their problems, but now she realizes that that their problems better be all of our problems. And so it was very well done. And what I love about it is they did a live action movie where people acted out, Emmett and his mother, stepfather, uncle, etc. And shout out to Glenn Turman. I mean, Glenn Turman looked just like he did on Different World. I mean, he played Uncle Most. And I mean, and they showed pictures of the real Uncle Mo. And I mean, I'm just saying, like, that man is frozen in time. Black don't crack. His melanin is popping. Shout out to Glenn Turman. So anyway, that was just a deviation because I mean, like, homeboy is just not aging. And look, I can barely remember the grocery list. He remembering full lines in movies. I'm just saying, he in his 70s.
He also been old all our life too. we met him old.
We did.
So we don't know.
No, I did not meet him old. You got to remember, I have parents. I met him in Cooley High. He was young. He was in high school back then.
Yeah, he still looks the same.
He looked just like he did on Cooley High when Coach East died. So, yes, I just told my whole age. But anyway, so the powerful thing is that, these stories are being told, and then they did the documentary interviewing his friends and his cousins that were with him and his uncles and his aunts. And, to watch these individuals. I mean, Emmett Till died in 1960. No, I'm sorry, 1955. So just 5 years before my mom was born. And so his cousins and things like, they're just in their late 60s. And 70s and recounting these memories. And his mother, good morning, everyone out there in social media land. And so, for his mother to take the stand she did, to write the book, to make the calls, to decide that the world was going to see what happened to her son, she realized the power of cameras and the media very early on. And it was said by Rosa Parks as well as Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., whose birthday is coming up this weekend, and who the next Monday we will do a full-blown King celebration. He mentioned, both of them mentioned, having seen those pictures in Jet Magazine and in Ebony and them being picked up by the press. Rosa Parks said unequivocally, she thought of him when she decided not to give up her seat that day on the bus. She thought of his face and she thought of what had been done to that 14-year-old young man. And she decided she was not going to be moved. And so it is so important that, we, even back then, we realized that the only way to really move the issues of race, white supremacy, equal rights, human rights forward is to actually touch the parts of our brain that control our emotions, because racism to me is a spiritual issue. It is spiritual. I mean, no laws have been able to handle it. And so it is something, it is that we don't fight against flesh and blood, but against principles and principalities, against spirits and principalities. And so that's what this is. It's a spirit. And so that being said, it's so important that we continue to bring forth our stories, to put them in front of the public, and to share them in all their truth. It's the past. It is American history, and so many are embarrassed by it, ashamed of it, feel it irrelevant because their relatives didn't live in the time and space that it happened. But we can't erase the past, but we can learn from it. And I was telling my children last night, the reason it's so important that we do learn from it and we learn about it, because it is impossible to know where you're going if you're not connected to where you came from.
And I think what the pictures and the articles did, if you don't see something, if you just hear about something, you can believe it, or it happened, it's not really sure. But once you see something, you see how brutal it is, and you see how bad it was, and you see how young the young man was, and you see that's why she had the open casket and had his face out so that everybody could see what occurred. So when you see something like that happen, it makes it real, and it makes it connect to the humanness of it. It's not just a story or something that you heard about, but that was an actual person that happened to. So I think that's what I think that's what the cameras are doing now, is that, we've all heard about these stories. We've all heard about police brutality, and, not just African Americans, but everyone's heard about it. But when you actually see the police beating an innocent man, or when you actually see
their knee on his neck for over 8 minutes.
Correct. When you actually see that happening, it makes it more realistic. It touches the human side of you, and it does make it a spiritual thing, because it does, once you see something, it connects to that spiritual part. It connects to the spirit inside of us, to where we can see it, and it's like, oh, this is really happening. This isn't just a news story. It's not just a sound bite. It's not just something I heard about. This is really going on.
And so to any white allies that may be watching or listening out there, or any allies of any ethnicity that may be watching or listening out there, when you think about what it emotes inside of you as a human, imagine how African Americans feel when they watch this type of footage. Imagine how we feel when individuals are found not guilty over and over and over again. Imagine. So one of the things that was uncovered, and it's been known for years, but it hasn't been widely publicized, is Emmett Till's father was sent to the military, allegedly for being an abusive husband to Emmett Till's mother. And so the judge in the case, which we do elect our judges, that's something else we're going to get to, just gave him two choices. He could either go to jail or he could go to the military. So they sent him to the military, which was another way of building the prison industrial complex and sending Black men over into a segregated military. So he got sent to Italy. While in Italy, there was an attack on the city. There was a raid that he was in. Him and some buddies were out that night. It was alleged that during the attack, some Italian women had gotten raped. It was never proven. It was never tried. There was no court case, but he was hung in Italy. Emmett Till's father was hung in Italy, and they sent his ring back to Emmett Till. He had a ring with his initials in it and his year of birth. And that ring was on Emmett Till's finger when his body was pulled out of the Tallahatchie River in Mississippi. And that's how they were able to identify him, because he had been beaten so brutally and had been underwater for so long, it was almost impossible to identify him based on the science and the DNA access that they had back then. But it was that ring that let them know that's who it was. And so Louis Till was hung without any type of court trial, without any type of DNA evidence, just based on allegedly raping these women in Italy. The military made a decision, and that's how they decided to end his death. And so this is, we wonder. I again having this conversation with my children. I said, when you look around at different neighborhoods, underserved neighborhoods that would be considered extremely urban, that's what they like to call them. when you look at families and you wonder why so many African American families don't necessarily have two-parent households, or why African American marriages, a lot of them don't tend to stand the test of time, or why there's this disconnect between some African American parents and their children or grandparents, etc. It's really post-traumatic slavery syndrome. It is inherently in us. Our families have been ripped apart since we had to walk to the coast of Africa, to the door, through the door of no return, make it through the Middle Passage to get here, and then get put on plantations and become the property of slave owners. And that being said, we could have gotten woken out of our sleep in the middle of the night and someone tell us that they were selling our spouse or selling our child, or that we were going to have 10 kids over the next, and all of them were getting sold. I mean, we were not considered a person. We were not considered a citizen. We were considered chattel, property to be used to maximize profitability for the slave owners. The crazy thing is, I was telling the kids, is that there weren't as many lynchings during slavery because we were considered property. And so, that being said, that would be like going to crash your car on purpose. I don't want to lose the value in that. So I'll beat you to the point of death, but you're going to survive it because I need you to get back out in that field.
Right. It wouldn't be a good return on investment if you go out killing your moneymaker, essentially. And the effects on the family, I don't think America will ever fully understand that slavery had on the country, and not just for African Americans, but for whites as well.
And I mean, and it falls into it affects our family. It affects the fact that, you know, we lack trust in a lot of medical professionals, things like the Tuskegee experiment. It affects the fact that there's a lack of trust between law enforcement and a lot of African Americans, first responders, and a lot of
got started a slave country.
yeah, and law enforcement a lot of times, and we'll get to that. Law enforcement really made up the first sectors of the Ku Klux Klan, and so there are just so many things that happened not so long ago that affect the ways in which we interact with each other, and we have come a very long way, but we do have a long way to go. I believe we have a caller on the line. Nope. Okay. And so I think somebody's going to call in this morning to talk about COVID testing. And that's a good segue because, you know, at the beginning of this, so many African Americans were not getting vaccinated and were concerned about the vaccination because of our history with medicine and because of our history of being used as guinea pigs to figure out and to test out different diseases and to be used as pawns and to be murdered, for lack of a better term, in order for the greater good to live.
I mean, and that goes back to slavery as well, being used as science experiments and studied for body parts and different things like that. And then, you know, as recent as the Tuskegee experiments, and that wasn't, you know, we talk about it, we learn about it in history class, but that wasn't ancient history.
Right.
You know, that went on in the last century. Like there are a lot of people that are alive when that occurred that can tell you, yeah, I remember when that was going on, or I heard about it. And then, you know, the vaccine comes out and everybody's like, whoa, I don't know about this. This could be another Tuskegee experiment. And it was said half jokingly, but in most good jokes, there's some portion of truth in it. So the challenge that came to the African American community is, do we trust this vaccine? It wasn't about, you know, is it going to work? It's just, do we trust that it's doing what they say it's supposed to do? And I think a lot of people, and some people still don't trust it.
Right.
Excuse me. And a lot of what occurred to us in the past is we hear about these stories and we hear about these things and we hear about them from such a young age. You know, I remember my grandfather telling me stories of how it was growing up in Alabama, and he had a definite distrust of white people. Like he made no qualms about it. And if I would have grown up the way he grew up, he told me if they caught him on the wrong side of Davis Avenue, white boys would try and jump him.
He told me that too.
It wasn't, you know, he just said it kind of like matter of fact.
Right.
Like if you were over there, if you were across the tracks on the wrong side of if you were across the tracks, he said if you didn't have on a hat or white gloves, they would try and jump on you. So basically, if you weren't over there driving Miss Daisy or serving somebody, they would just try and jump on you. And that was it wasn't a, and this is before emails, before social media. So this wasn't a, no reports went out, or they didn't have, they might have had a town hall meeting, but it was just known, hey, if we catch black people over here, we jump on them. They don't belong on our side of town. And that's the effect that it had on white people as well, because not only do, as African Americans, do we hear those stories, but I'm sure not all of the people that were jumping on black people back then have reformed and changed their thinking. So they tell their grandkids stories about, yeah, we used to catch them on our side of town and we would just jump them and beat them. So it's America as a whole needs healing from slavery.
We have a caller. Caller, you are live. Who do we have?
How are you?
Hi, Dr. Lisa. We're great. How are you?
I'm great.
Good.
Did I call at the right time?
Sure. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
And so I was just told that you would be joining us.
Yes. Again, Brandon usually comes on to speak a part of with the Apollo Lab. So yes, we are continuing to use or join forces with JAK Foundation to do COVID testing. And what I wanted to do, what I wanted to get on the air to express for those, again, just let everyone know to please come out to get tested. Honestly, even if you don't even have still symptoms, I've had about two people that tested, and they actually were just testing, just randomly testing, just to just because we were with family for the holiday and they just wanted to, just do protocol. And so they just knew they were negative because they had no symptoms or, not feeling any symptoms at all. And they actually tested positive and they were floored. They just couldn't believe they were positive. But again, as I told them, okay, the test results don't lie. And wanted to express that people, you can't be carriers. And I had to explain to them that you can't be carriers of the virus and not have symptoms or not feel symptoms and be carriers and infect others with the virus. So they, in turn, she ended up bringing her family in, like 4 people in her family in to get tested, and 2 of them actually tested positive. And so she was floored.
Yeah.
Of wondering, yeah. So we just really want to encourage people to come out to get tested. We've had some good results, among people to come out, but we're encouraging more people to come. And again, if you have not, even if you don't feel symptoms, just for precautions to just come out to get tested. For those who also for those who have tested positive, the CDC, they say again after 10 days, usually after 10 days, the virus usually you're pretty in the clear. But also too, we encourage you to come and get tested again to make sure that you are negative, because they have found research that shows that there are those who have had the virus, but the virus can last up to 83 days, which is I found interesting. But just to make sure that you are in the negative, for your safety as well as your family and friends, to if you test positive, to always come back to take a second test to make sure that you're negative.
Dr. Lisa, how often is it that someone doesn't display any symptoms, but they're a carrier of it?
It's rare, but it happens.
Okay.
So I wasn't surprised that the 2 ladies were shocked that they were negative, but that they were carriers. So it can happen. It's rare, but it does happen. that you can carry the virus and not have any symptoms at all.
And if someone's had it, what is usually the time frame that they are, let's say, immune to it, or that they won't get it again?
The time frame, that's a good question, because your immune system is built up. They say within a couple months that you are, your immune system is built up to fight against it. But we have had, as a matter of fact, I know someone who's gotten it 3 times. And so on the average, your immune system is built up for a couple of months, but not everybody's immune system is built up to that. And again, to the point, I know someone who has had it 3 times already.
You know, what's so interesting to me, Dr. Lisa, is so our 9-year-old daughter tested positive a few weeks ago, and unfortunately had some shortness of breath, and we had to take her to the hospital. And, you know, I asked them, should she get tested after quarantine before going back to school, because it was over holiday break, and was told, no, she's going to test positive for the next 90 days, no matter what. And so I just think it interesting, all the varying information that we're getting from so many different medical professionals.
It is interesting. It's interesting, no, because I actually tested positive the first day when we test on the 29th. And so I said, as to how ironic that, you know, we're starting the COVID testing site, and I end up getting sick right at the very beginning. So I actually tested, and I tested again on past Wednesday, and I tested negative. So again, it varies. So that's why we always encourage people to test again, to test after, if they're positive, go back and test again.
Yeah, and I think that's the safer route, because with all the variants that seem to come out every week, and with all the unknowns that there seems to be with this virus, I mean, you know, there have been asymptomatic people since the virus initially hit the U.S. and just one second. All right, legally, our call letters had to come in at the top of the hour. So yeah, there's just so many variances, and so better to be tested and not tested. I was really our younger son went back to college in North Carolina, and prior to being able to move into the dorm, when he moved into the dorm in the fall, all he needed to do was show his vaccination card. This time, prior to be able to moving into the dorm, not only did he have to show his vaccination card, but he had to have a negative COVID test. And so thankfully he was negative, but they have a COVID dorm that he would have had to move into had he tested positive, and he would have had to stay quarantined on campus should that have happened. And so there are a lot of extra precautions that are happening. And as you know, I personally have friends who live in Asia and other parts of the world that, and even I will say outside of Wisconsin, when I get to other states, like when I was picking my son up for the holidays from North Carolina, I could feel how much more serious other parts of the country are taking the virus than us. Just mask mandates and all of those things. And so it's really, really, really interesting.
Right. The caveat to all of this is that for us being on the holiday break, the Christmas and New Year's, this is where the influx was coming in, because again, we have families that have gotten together, have more children that are testing positive. And so this is why we have the online, where most of the schools now are online until parents are testing their children, because to be tested and to take all precautions, unnecessary precautions. And to your point, I actually work at Concordia University. I'm a professor at Concordia University in Macon, and the precautions that they're taking is commendable as well. So again, for everyone that enters the building, they have to have a green, it's like a green code. So
Mm-hmm.
every day you have to log in to assist the system on campus to give to tell if you have symptoms, if you don't have symptoms. If you have symptoms, you have to stay off campus, be tested before you can come on campus. So it's so much that goes into play with this. And I really am encouraging everyone to just take it serious and just get tested.
And so just so you guys know, the JAK Center is doing testing. It's located at 78. Well, Apollo Labs is doing testing at the JAK Foundation, which is located at 7841 West Appleton Avenue. It's happening Monday through Friday. What time are you guys there, Dr. Lisa?
We are there from 10 all week, from 10 to 5.
Okay.
From 10 to 5. And so to actually it's actually Heart and Healing is the actual organization, which is my organization, that I
okay.
Contract put Apollo Labs in as a private testing site, a private lab to be a part of this, to make sure that the results were able to get in sooner than average. So they've done great of having a great turnaround for testing. So we would like to continue that, and again encourage everyone to come out and be tested, even if you don't have symptoms, just to take necessary precautions.
Yeah.
Dr. Lisa, I have one question. If someone tests positive and they do have the virus, what are some of your recommendations, that they do during quarantine to make things a little bit easier or to, alleviate some of the pain or the symptoms?
Actually, because of the virus, you actually pretty much like I did. I'm stuttering, so I'm thinking about what I had to go through. And the recommendation, you have to let it work its course. And if you come out of your room, and if you come anywhere within the house, make sure you have a mask on to keep everyone else safe, to eliminate any germs of the virus spreading to anyone else in the house. But again, the symptoms, you still would, cold medicine and the regular medicine, it does allow it to subside, some of the symptoms to subside temporarily. It's very similar to the flu. That's the best I can tell you for the process that I went through, and it does interrupt the respiratory area. So it is a virus, and the best, you just have to let it work its course.
Yeah, and definitely agreeing with you, because the symptoms have shown up differently for, I would say, every single person in our household, from something as simple as a headache and a fever to an extreme fever over 104, and the inability to have clear airways, just depending on their ages. And so our doctor, as well as urgent care or the hospital, wherever they ended up, has given different recommendations of care for each and every one of them. Dr. Lisa, thank you for joining us this morning, and thank you for the work that Heart and Healing is doing to provide an additional COVID testing site for our city. We know that the city testing sites have been overrun. So again, this is someplace additional you can go that doesn't have as long of a wait. 7841 West Appleton at the JAK Foundation. They're doing the exact same tests through an FDA approved lab. Because of the surge, it is taking a little longer to get test results. So we ask for your patience with that. And if you have COVID symptoms, just go ahead and self-quarantine until you get your results back. A lot of kids are home doing virtual school right now. And so, I know our kids were talking about, it was like the school week started with 10 kids, and by Friday they were down to 3. And a lot of the teachers were being impacted as well. And so I'm actually, I know it's rough on a lot of parents due to childcare and work obligations and everything. But I actually think it would, as a mother who has had all of her kids get COVID and watch them struggle, I actually would prefer them to be home safe and to deal with the challenges that come with them being home. than to sit in the hospital or another day with any of them.
Right. I'm glad that those steps are being taken, and we just encourage everyone to take those necessary steps to make sure that that your family is safe.
Yes. Well, you have a great Monday, and thank you so much. And it was a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye bye.
Thank you, Dr. Lisa.
So again,
Lisa's the plug. I don't know how she got some extra COVID tests. They've been running short everywhere.
no, they been,
The tests?
no. Well, I mean, they've been running out, because they only give them so many a day because they have a lifespan. They have to be kept at a certain temperature, et cetera, et cetera. Like I've talked to different doctors about it, and so they only can do so many at a certain period of time.
Okay.
Look, you think she back there cooking it up? I mean, what you? She just got swabs on swabs on swabs. He made it sound like that's a swab. You know what? That's because JAK Foundation is affiliated with some praying people, and so they got favor. Look, he made it sound like she was in the kitchen, like cooking up swabs. Like, come on now, we just talked about people's lack of faith.
I didn't say she was cooking up swabs. I just said she had the plug on the top. Dr. Lisa is a well-connected doctor. So if you're having any problems,
and Concordia is a Christian school.
Correct.
I mean, so God is all in it. Yeah. And the God is in it, ain't no limit.
Oh, okay.
I just quoted the song. What?
All right.
What?
I just said okay.
Okay. I mean, I know you probably went back to Master P. I was in the spirit. That was the Lord when I said no limit.
Have you seen that COVID video? I got it.
No.
Okay, so there is.
Oh my gosh, this sounds bad.
That Master P song about it? Yeah. Somebody remixed it and said, "I got it." So like the whole song is, "You got it."
That's not. See.
Yo, it's hilarious.
See. Kiwan gonna Google it right after this.
Got it. She got it.
You know what? I don't want to get it. So, and and the thing is that, in instances like this, I know people like between us calling it Omarion and, this and that, first of all, the Black community has gotten hit the hardest of any community in the United States as a result of COVID due to pre-existing conditions and being predisposed to other sicknesses and illnesses. And so it's not that we make light of it. It's not that we don't take the virus seriously. It's not that we haven't experienced a tremendous amount of death as it relates to the virus. It really goes back to what we were talking to before, is that we have built a resilience muscle because of our history in this country. That we have learned to laugh to keep from crying. I mean, when you have had hoses turned on you, dogs put on you, when you have been whipped to the point of death, when you have watched public lynchings. That's the other thing I was going to say before Dr. Lisa called. You were talking about your grandfather and growing up in Alabama. And, that is one of the misnomers that is being brought to light. And I'm so thankful. And I know as a child, that was my thought process and probably most of our thought processes, especially because, in history class as a kid, you learn about the Montgomery bus boycott. You learn about Selma and the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And you learn about, which I pray they changed the name to the John Lewis Bridge because Edmund Pettus was a grand wizard of the KKK. But anyway, so, we learn about all of these things. And then, of course, we learn about the Confederacy and them succeeding from the Union, et cetera, et cetera. So we think all of these lynchings and all of this white supremacy and all of these things that we see pictures of happen in the South. And that is not true. There was a mass migration of Black people from the South to the North. At the Smithsonian Museum of African American History and Culture, the exhibit is called From the Fields to the Factories, because we moved to the North that we thought was going to be the promised land. We thought we were going to get out of the cotton fields, we were going to get out of the tobacco fields, we were going to get out of sharecropping, we were going to get off these dirt roads and in these shacks, and we were going to move to the big cities, and we were going to have a better life. And some of us did. But also what happened is that we did, like the Tulsa Massacre is a great example with Black Wall Street. What we did is we moved in, and whites who lived in the North did not necessarily appreciate the fact that we provided cheaper labor, that we were thought of as harder workers based on our history of slavery, and that we moved. And most of the pictures that we know, like if you close your eyes right now and you picture a picture that you've seen of a lynching, it probably happened either in Indiana or Ohio, because the pictures that are used the most, one was Strange Fruit, the poem Strange Fruit that was turned into the song by Billie Holiday, which Audra Day won an Academy Award for last year, was based on a picture that happened in Marion, Indiana, of Thomas Ship and Abram, I can't think of his, Smith, I believe is his last name. And they were two teens accused of killing a white man and raping a white woman in Marion, Indiana. And they were pulled out of the jail and they were hung, and one of them was even castrated. That's why if you look at the picture, and this is the picture where the white man is pointing up at these two young Black men, that is the most widely used. It was used at the beginning of the documentary for Mamie Till Mosley, and the song was used. And one of the things, especially if you live in Milwaukee, I want you to know is there was supposed to be a third man on that tree. As a matter of fact, his rope was flung over that same branch. The noose was put around his neck. It was tightened, and he had rope burn on his neck. And his name is Dr. James Cameron, and he founded America's Black Holocaust Museum, which sits on the corner of 4th and North Avenue, now known as Bell R. Phillips and North Avenue. And he was just 16 years old. He was not there at the time of the crime. The white woman who was allegedly raped said he wasn't there and I wasn't raped. And he still was wrongfully accused, sent to jail for 5 years at 16 years old. But what happened is, as they were about to lynch him, he closed his eyes, he prayed, like any of us would do. He looked up at the two men hanging, his friends on either side, thinking, okay, it's my turn. And then the crowd quieted. Now, you have to understand that this is 1930, when lynchings were like a carnival. People brought their kids out, they had popcorn, they took pictures. And something that was brought to light is that the reason the photographers took the pictures focusing on the crowds and had the crowds pose and smile around the bodies, it was really a mind manipulation trick. Because if they could get you to focus on those well-dressed individuals that were smiling with pride at burning, brutalizing, and lynching this body, then they could dehumanize the person who they had just murdered. And so that was very powerful to me to learn that that was a journalistic trick that was used to think about where our eye gates go when we look at pictures like that. So Dr. Cameron, it's in his book, A Time of Terror, which I just think it should be required reading for every student in this country. And so they're screaming, they're yelling, they had beat him to the point he could barely see. He doesn't even know how he's still conscious. I mean, they had spit on him, they had hit him with billy clubs, they had dragged him from the jail, they put the rope around his neck. He felt the rope burn, he had the rope burn, and he prayed, and then he said a voice, and he believes it was the voice of God, yelled out, "Let this boy go. He had nothing to do with this." And they've interviewed countless people. I mean, I'm talking BBC, Oprah, all kinds of people have gone back to Marion, Indiana, and interviewed countless people. And no one has said they'd heard that voice besides him. Some people have been given credit for being the voice, but they like, no, it wasn't me. And so the crowd quiets. Of course, he assumes I must be dead if this crowd is quiet. He opens his eyes, the crowd parts like the Red Sea and allows him to stagger back to the jail, which he goes on to be taken to another county and spends 5 years in jail for something that a woman said in court he was not there and he did not do it. And so, the thing is that as we talk about Ahmaud Arbery's case, and then we think back, this is not new. This has been going on. This was a 16-year-old man, but then he went on and he dedicated his life to human rights, to civil rights, to love and forgiveness. And eventually, the state of Indiana did pardon Dr. Cameron, and there was a reconciliation between him and the family of the man who was robbed and shot, although Dr. Cameron was not there. And the brother of that man cried and apologized to him for how his life, because he ended up in Milwaukee because his family got so many death threats that they had to leave Marion, Indiana. And so he's left his legacy here. And in a couple of weeks, on MLK Day, I believe, we're going to have the CEO and president of America's Black Holocaust Museum, Dr. Robert Davis, here because it is reopening next month on February 25th, which would have been Dr. Cameron's 108th birthday. In June of 1988, when he opened the museum, there were not American institutions that existed that memorialize us from pre-captivity through slavery through today as education beacons. And so he did something that was unprecedented. He did something that still serves as inspiration for us. And I think that it would be a loss to have something that is hallowed ground. This is somebody, he is one of the only known U.S. survivors of a lynching that lived to tell his story.
And I think one of the things that when you mentioned the pictures of the lynchings, is that you have to look at the different ages of the people in the pictures that are watching, the people in attendance. And some of them are young children. One's in his 40s, 50s, and
60s.
even sometimes the 60s.
Yeah.
Those are, excuse me, those are someone's parents and someone's grandparents.
Dan Pink can say with you right now.
So to that point, like I said earlier, when my grandfather was telling me stories about how things were, they're telling their kids and grandkids stories about how things were. And everybody didn't appreciate Barack Obama being elected as president. Mm-hmm. So not everybody is telling the stories of how far we've come and how great things are. Some people are telling the stories of how we need to get things back to the way they were. Some people are telling the stories of we need to make America great again. Some people are telling those stories about, man, I used to remember we would go to lynchings, and if you were lucky, you'd come home with an ear or you could come home with a finger.
Right.
You'll come home with body parts as souvenirs. So that is the insidious part of racism and the American history that occurred, because it's not slavery history. It's not African American history. This is American history. These are events that took place all across these glorious United States of ours. And there are things that need to be documented and talked about. And I remember when I was in college, I had a friend from Michigan. He was from a small town in Michigan. And he said every month a Black person was hung in Michigan.
Yeah.
And that was in his life. That was in our lifetime. This wasn't something, he wasn't talking about history. And he said a real matter of fact, like, it's just going to happen. Because there are the Ku Klux Klan is still alive. Right. I don't know if everybody saw that Spike Lee movie, Black Klansman, but they didn't, they put away the robes and the hoods, but they didn't disappear. They didn't go away. They just
They caused the end. Last week was the 1 year anniversary of the insurrection, where you had basically they didn't call themselves the Ku Klux Klan, but you had white supremacists storm the Capitol looking to shoot Nancy Pelosi, hanging the Confederate flag with a noose and burning crosses outside of our Capitol, and running through, sitting at the desk of the head of the House with their legs up, taking pictures, killing Capitol police officers. Yeah. And there is still people out here calling themselves conspiracy theorists. We watched the whole thing unfold on television, and like, nah, that ain't really happened like that. See what happened was, see what happened was. And here's the thing, they think like close to 1,000 people, more than 1,000 people than that. 30 people got arrested. a black woman who was having a mental health crisis. No, a black woman who was having a mental health crisis drove her car through the gates of the White House, and she got murdered. And she didn't make it out of her car. She didn't pull no guns on anybody. She was unarmed, but somehow sounds about white. Somehow, these people stormed the Capitol, got through, beat Capitol police officers, and you can't tell me now. Look, usually Minister West is a conspiracy.
None of the cops feared for their life.
They did. They absolutely.
No, but I mean, like, you know how.
Oh, they say if you're in imminent danger, you can kill them.
When black people get killed, I feared for my life.
Yeah.
None of them feared for their life.
Oh, they lost their lives.
None of them got killed.
No.
None of the stormers got killed because the police feared for their life.
No. And a lot of them, it's gone back that a lot of them were elected officials, public policy makers in the towns that they came from, and so. You know, you guys are probably like, what is your point? This is a depressing show. We can't think of these things as depressing. We have to think of these things as gaining knowledge and understanding and wisdom. Because again, when we wonder, why are our young people still in Hyundais and Kias? Why are they just riding down the street, swerving just to be swerving and not thinking about the value of life? Why do we have a 16-year-old who was working at Burger King week before last here in Milwaukee and lost her life? And they thought she lost her life based on the armed robber who was there, who pulled a gun to steal the money. In reality, she lost her life, allegedly, by one of her coworkers who shot at him from the inside, who happened to be the boyfriend of the manager, who helped him clean up the gun casings. He shot her on accident because most of y'all can't shoot, just so you know. And so you never been to a gun range. You never practiced. You didn't grow up in the South shooting cans. Like, you can't shoot. You can't. Like, you talking about you trying to say, you think you about to save the day. You don't watch The Harder They Fall, and you done killed this baby. And now you on the run, and you have a warrant out for your arrest as a convicted felon who had a firearm, and now this woman who you lived with, who helped you pick up the casings while this young lady died and hid the gun in the Burger King safe. Like, come on, people. We have to care. When they took us from Africa, they did not take a stupid animal. They did not take individuals who were not capable of putting thoughts together, who didn't care about family. As a matter of fact, the way the jails were created, if you know anything about the holding pens that were created before we got onto the ships, they were created in a way to separate tribes. And so you couldn't be with someone who spoke your language. And so that was the first manipulation they used to separate us, because we were tribes of people who cared about one another, who protected one another. We were tribes of people that respected the women and the children, and the men took care of their families. We were doctors. We invented algebra. We built the pyramids. We were engineers. We were lawyers. We sat and we had judges, and we had juries, and we had village officials. There were things. Most of Europe was so far behind what was progressing and happening in Africa. Africa is the only continent on this planet that has every self-sustaining item it needs to take care of itself. It has every mineral, it has everything. Yet it has been so pillaged that it is thought of to be the most impoverished nation of the continent in the world, when that couldn't be further from the truth. It actually was the richest.
Correct. And like you said, because of the pillaging and things that occurred, it's caused Africa to be in the state that it is today. And not only that, but also the imagery that gets shown of Africa. Because when we get shown Africa, we see the
feed the children. That's all we saw growing up. We didn't see them in Lagos, Nigeria, in their beautiful clothes, still rocking their gold, because they are.
Right. We didn't see all of that. Now, to one point, you mentioned the cross burnings, and I was talking to my grandmother this week, and she let me know when their church moved to the South Side for a while. I don't know if it's the South Side or West Dallas for a while, and she let me know her mom was telling her dad that he needed to buy the church a building. And he was like, "Oh, I'm not getting involved in that. I'm not gonna do it." And they were over there, and it was fairly predominantly black church, and her family and a lot of other families attended. And she told me that a cross got burned in front of the church
Right in Milwaukee.
And this is during my grandmother's lifetime. She's still alive, and she remembers that cross being burned.
The last Klan rally here was was not too long ago, right on the steps of the post office on Wisconsin Avenue.
And shortly after that, my great grandfather bought the church and building. So when we talk about American history, it is not. This is stuff that went on in people's lifetime. People that are still alive. We're not talking about the Civil War. We're not talking about things from the 1800s or 1902. Like, this is stuff from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. These are recent events. People can tell you, "Oh yeah, I remember when that happened." Like, it wasn't that long ago. And when we see like you said, with the imagery, when we see those pictures of lynchings, they're usually in black and white.
Right.
And that makes it seem so much older than it was.
Right.
There were color photos back then.
Right.
They just print the pictures in black and white to make it seem like it was much longer ago than it was.
Right. It's the same way, you use black and white when you don't think you look so good on Instagram. It's the same trick.
All my pictures in
color. Oh my God. So the final point before Minister Fresh West has to leave us is it's important that we share these stories with our kids. It's important that we share with them where they come from. It's important that we share with them their ancestry, that we research our own ancestry. Every family doesn't have the benefit that we have of multi-generational, you having a conversation with your grandmother, the conversations I had with my grandparents, the fact that my great-grandparents' land is still there for me to visit in Mississippi. You've been to my paternal great-grandparents' land in Tennessee. Our kids have been to Palacios, Texas, where your family originates from. Like, a lot of families don't have that. A lot of people have not left Milwaukee. And so the thing is that then it's incumbent upon us. What would happen in Africa is if somebody lost their parents, the tribe took care of them. And so we have to get that tribal mindset back. That what Mamie Till Mosley was talking about is that if any of us have a problem, we all have a problem.
We have, but it's just in a negative aspect. That's why gangs are so popular, because of the tribal aspect. So we don't have to have it in terms of we don't have to get it back. We never lost it. We just have to use it for a positive mindset.
That's good.
And the church needs to adapt that tribal mindset. And instead of tribes competing, that they need to come together. Like, hey, we have this going on over here. You have that going on over there. Let's come together and team up. And they got this going on over there. Let's bring them in so that, we can take care of the city instead of just talking about how bad it's getting.
Right. I got some homework for you. Look up how Father Grappi and Velar Phillips came together during the housing crisis here in Milwaukee. And look at what they did when 43 basically decimated the Black community here in Milwaukee. And the way that they protested. Look, right now there's a new documentary that came out on HBO Max called King in the Wilderness that chronicles Dr. King's last 18 months of his death. And it's spoken by some of his best friends. And the reason that we are getting so much of this is because Herbert Hoover, who was the head of the FBI, there was a statute of limitations on when the FBI records could be released. And it's just been a few years that statute lifted. And so if you're thinking like, oh my God, all of a sudden they care about Black people and they doing all these documentaries. No, now we can read the truth. Now we can see the illegal wiretaps. Now we can read the documentation. All of those records were sealed and no one was allowed to read them until a few years ago. And so now proper documentation, proper archival footage can be pulled from both sides of the narrative to prove what was really happening.
Yeah. Well, I'm off. You all have a beautiful day. It was wonderful being back. God bless you.
Thank you, Fresh West. So, I think that one of the things, I'm always asking myself and asking other people, what can we do to help our youth? and to help them to place a higher value on life, and not even just our youth, but the woman who was the manager at the Burger King that I was just speaking at. The news says she's 38 years old, and so one of the things that we can do definitely is from a young age is to remind our youth where they come from, is to show them the resilience of our people. I lured my kids. We watched Encanto, which is the new Disney movie. Then we watched Shang-Chi, which is the other new Disney movie. Then I said, okay, now we're going to watch Amend about the 14th Amendment. And it was like, wait, what? We just took a whole sharp left. But I remember as a child that my parents and my grandparents did that to me. I remember sitting for a whole week with my grandmother watching Roots, thinking like, I don't want to watch this. Man, I was so into Chicken George by Wednesday, you couldn't tell me nothing. Like, I wanted to know what happened. I mean, I was all in. And, we lost Sidney Poitier last week, too. I want to make note of that. The first Black man to win an Academy Award. And, when I think about Sidney Poitier and Harry Belafonte and the activists that they were, even I was thinking last night as we were watching the men, I was thinking about Frederick Douglass, how he outlived Lincoln. And he was out here like he escaped from slavery. He giving speeches. He out here giving a speech on the 4th of July. Talk about why y'all got me here. This ain't my celebration. Like, he was busting it down 600 white people. And he played it real good. He started the speech like, our founding fathers were geniuses. They created something great, but they didn't create it for me. I mean, he was super gangster with it. I mean, we talking Frederick Douglass, 1865, like, do your thing. And so, and he lived until his 90s. And so did Harriet Tubman. And so you think about, like, we need to share these stories with our young people, not just our Black young people, our white young people too, because when they look at our neighborhoods and they look at the news, they need to understand that we are still dealing with the trauma from how African Americans were brought into this country, how we've been treated through Reconstruction, through separate but equal, aka Jim Crow, and up until recently. And why it's such a win for us when verdicts like the Arbery verdict come down, because guess what? We sit there on pins and needles thinking we're never going to see the day that anyone cares that any of us are murdered. And so every time we see a day that someone doesn't find a loophole to let the murderers off, we're honestly shocked. And then once the shock wears off, we feel like, okay, finally one of us was seen as human. And if he can be seen as human, and if they can say that his life mattered, now a precedent. See, this is what happens when a conviction comes down in court. Now other lawyers can come in and say, based the precedent that was set in the Ahmaud Arbery case says that this. And that's what's so important about verdicts, is they are used to fight other cases, and they are used to defend or prosecute other cases. And that's why it's so important that we vote. We've got a temporary or interim mayor right now in Chevy Cavalier because Mayor Barrett took an ambassador position he was appointed by the president. And so we have a mayoral election that's going to be coming up in February. We also next year will be voting for a new lieutenant governor, senators, etc. And, we need to pay attention to what's happening, because we can't be mad when our public policy makers don't make the decisions we would like them to make, or all of a sudden we've got a Supreme Court made up of people who don't care about what happens in the Black community. Guess who decides who gets appointed to the Supreme Court? The president. So guess what happens when you don't vote? You don't have a say in who gets appointed to the Supreme Court. And I understand how the Electoral College works. And guess what, though? The Electoral College is very much pressed by the popular vote. So don't think that your vote doesn't matter, because it does. All right. On that note, we've talked enough. We're going to get to some music. Let's bring this thing up. Thank you, guys. We're on till 10. You can tune in at WGLBradio.com or locally at FM 96.1 or AM 1560. You can always call 414-578-1560. Bye.